Every workplace and every worker has legal responsibilities when it comes to health and safety in the workplace. Working safely is more than just complying with the law. It's about getting home safely every day uninjured. It's about ensuring your quality of life is not affected by your work activities. Think about all the things you value in life and sometimes take for granted. Taking a chance with safety is not worth it.
Hi, I'm Doug Nightingale. Our dedicated team is our #1 resource. Because of that, your health and safety is our top priority. Creating a safe work environment is part of our culture. We want everyone to go home safely. Our ultimate goal is zero harm to our people. Health and safety is everyone's responsibility. Take the time to plan out your work activity for each day. Think about the risks and how you can eliminate those risks. You're an expert at your job, you know your work environment, and you are best placed to find ways to make your work safer. If you ever doubt as to the safety of a given task, discuss it with your supervisor. Never take a chance with safety. One chance is all it takes for a life-altering accident to occur. Our success is measured by our accomplishments. Let's work together to make safety our best accomplishment.
In this orientation, we will review British Columbia Occupational Health and Safety Law and WorkSafe BC requirements, highlight components of the NEL Occupational Health and Safety Program and Safety Management System, your rights and responsibilities in the workplace, hazard identification and pre-task risk assessment, emergency procedures and first aid. We'll look at WHMIS, ergonomics and safe lifting techniques. We will also highlight specific requirements for dealing with various workplace hazards such as electrical hazards, de-energization and lockout, fall protection, ladders, scaffolds and temporary work platforms, hazardous materials such as silica and asbestos, confined spaces, and tools, machinery, and equipment. During this orientation, I encourage you to follow along with the handouts provided. Make notes and highlight areas you would like more information on from your supervisor. At NEL, our safety management system will encompass several occupational health and safety programs. These include hazard recognition and control, return to work, health and wellness, ergonomics, hearing protection, emergency procedures, violence in the workplace prevention, employee assistance program, first aid, and WHMIS. The Joint Occupational Safety and Health Committee, the JOSH, is working together to create a safe and healthy workplace. The JOSH is comprised of employee and employer representatives who work cooperatively to identify and resolve safety and health problems. The JOSH Committee is a recommending body working to resolve issues through consensus. The committee is a principal forum for joint labor management consultation and the development of solutions to safety and health problems in the workplace. These are just a few of the committee's responsibilities. Receive and consider employees' complaints on matters of safety and health only after the issue has been reviewed with the worker's supervisor and there is no satisfactory resolve. Establish and promote programs for the education of employees in safety and health. Participate in all inquiries and investigations into occupational safety and health matters. Collect information on existing or potential hazards in the workplace, and recommend corrective action when necessary. Just like all other activities at NEL, you play an important role within the safety management system. To ensure that the risks of NEL activities are held to an acceptable level, our employees must understand the tasks they perform, recognize and analyze the hazards, develop and implement safety controls, perform work safely, periodically assess and improve the performance of those controls. NEL is vitally concerned with accident prevention and for your overall welfare and safety. We need your help in preventing accidents that may result in personal injury or damage to property and equipment. All injuries must be reported immediately to your supervisor. Failure to do so may result in delay of proper first aid, medical treatment, and any potential compensation benefits. All defective tools and equipment must be brought to the attention of your supervisor and removed from service. Any accident that occurs will be regarded as a serious matter and will be investigated and acted on to prevent its reoccurrence. In 1917, the Workers' Compensation Board was created. Founded on a compromise, workers gave up their right to sue, and employers agreed to fund a no-fault insurance system. WorkSafe BC sets and enforces health and safety standards and provides compensation and rehabilitation to injured workers. Society has come to view occupational injuries and fatalities as avoidable and unacceptable. Because of this lack of tolerance, advances in health and safety law have led to criminal prosecution for individual directors, managers, and supervisors. It's important for you to understand your rights and responsibilities under this law. WorkSafe BC imposes minimum standards on employers, including protection for worker rights. These include the right to know, the right to participate, the right to refuse. You have the right to know about any potential hazards which you may encounter or be exposed to. The right to know includes training specific to the hazards, machinery, and equipment within your work environment. You have the right to participate in the identification of workplace hazards or health and safety concerns and be involved in the resolution of such hazards or concerns. You also have the right to refuse unsafe work. This regulation states that a worker may refuse unsafe work if it endangers their health and safety or that of a coworker's. You may refuse unsafe work if any equipment, machine, or tool you are operating is likely to endanger yourself or others. The physical condition of the workplace may endanger yourself or others. Your task contravenes the Occupational Health and Safety Act or regulation. You must immediately notify your supervisor of any of the above unsafe conditions. Now let's take a look at employer duties and responsibilities. NEL will provide a safe and healthy workplace for all workers. Take every precaution reasonable in the protection of workers. When appointing a supervisor, appoint a competent person. Establish and maintain a health and safety program for all aspects of the business. Ensure all workers and supervisory staff are trained and made aware of all hazards. Report accidents and injuries to authorities as required by the Workers' Compensation Act. Demonstrate commitment to accident prevention. Consider accident prevention and safety performance when evaluating employees for new positions or promotions. Allow workers and supervisors the right to participate in hazard recognition. Make available a copy of the Workers' Compensation Act and regulation within the workplace. And annually review the company's OH&S policy and program. Supervisors' duties and responsibilities include being responsible for on-site accident prevention and take every reasonable precaution to protect their workers. Supervisors must advise all workers of hazards and potential hazards associated with the job site. Ensure that all employees on site wear personal protective equipment. Ensure first aid supplies are provided. Ensure that all employees work in accordance with the Workers' Compensation Act and regulation, and that all subcontractors on site comply with NEL policy, the Workers' Compensation Act, and the regulation. Workers' duties and responsibilities. All workers must comply with the Workers' Compensation Act and its regulations and strictly adopt the NEL rules. Workers are expected to adhere to the following. Take every reasonable precaution necessary to prevent accidents and to protect your health and safety. Comply with the Workers' Compensation Act and its regulation. Carry out work in accordance with the Health and Safety Program and establish safe work procedures. Use or wear protective equipment, devices, and clothing that's provided. Do not engage in horseplay or similar conduct that may endanger you or any other person. Ensure that your ability to work without risk is not impaired by alcohol, drugs, or other causes. Never walk past, ignore an unsafe situation. Report unsafe situations to the supervisor immediately. Report injury and illness to your supervisor without delay. Help new workers recognize job hazards and follow proper procedures. Participate in joint health and safety committees where applicable, and be aware that you may be subject to disciplinary action where either company safety rules or government regulations are violated. Corrective disciplinary measures are in place to deal with non-compliant issues. Our enforcement policy is designed to identify and correct non-compliance while supporting the employee in changing their behavior. All workers are expected to follow and adhere to the applicable requirements of the NEL OH&S program and the project-specific program. Compliance with federal, provincial, or municipal regulations, as well as owner and client rules, is a condition of employment and will be reasonably enforced at all times. NEL has a progressive discipline policy. This includes, first, a verbal warning, second, a written warning, third, a second written warning, and fourth, senior management review, which may result in possible suspension and/or termination. Note, certain blatant violations may result in immediate termination at the discretion of your foreman, supervisor, project manager, and/or safety representative. The following are a list of violations that may result in suspension or dismissal: blatant breach of NEL policy and procedures, harassment, traffic violations, fall protection violations, confined space, entering unshored excavations, fighting, failure to lock out, lack of supervision, site coordination, use of drugs, alcohol, or intentional misuse of prescription drugs, walking past an unsafe act or condition and not correcting it or reporting it immediately to your supervisor. At NEL, we are committed to a harassment and violence-free work environment. Harassment is not tolerated at any time. Be aware there is the potential for harassment and violence in the workplace from the public and other trades. NEL expects you to avoid confrontation and engaging in any violence. If you have been subject to or witnessed harassment, violence, and/or theft, report it immediately to your supervisor. Workers are often left to work independently and on some projects alone. Sometimes you may not see a coworker until coffee or lunchtime. It's important and a WorkSafe BC requirement to check on the well-being of a coworker. If a worker will be working alone or in isolation, a working alone procedure is required. Refer to the NEL policy on working alone. Supervisors should check on the well-being of workers who have been assigned to work alone or in isolation. NEL strives to offer and provide opportunities for injured workers to perform meaningful, modified work during their recovery period. Every effort will be made to accommodate employees with appropriate work that will not aggravate or prolong their disability or injury. If you have been injured at work, it is essential for you to provide NEL with as much information as possible regarding the extent and limitations of your injury. Prior to commencing work at any project or site, the project manager, supervisor, or office manager is responsible to ensure first aid services are provided. NEL will endeavor to provide immediate access to first aid services and equipment at all workplaces during the posted hours of work. To achieve this goal, we encourage all employees to participate in the Occupational First Aid Level 1 course. It is crucial that all employees report workplace illness and injuries to the designated first aid attendant and their supervisor immediately. For all major injuries, wounds, or medical emergencies, contact 911 without delay. All work sites will have a designated first aid attendant with an assigned backup person. On large projects, the prime contractor will usually have a designated first aid attendant on site. When working on a prime contractor's site, NEL employees must ensure they are familiar with the site-specific emergency response plan and how to summon the first aid attendant. The designated NEL first aid attendant name and contact information will be posted on the NEL site lockup door. All workers are to report any workplace injury or illness immediately to their supervisor and first aid attendant. All NEL offices and facilities have a fire safety plan. These plans describe emergency evacuation routes and should be posted on all occupied floors. These plans identify the names of fire wardens, evacuation routes and muster stations, location of emergency firefighting equipment, and procedures for safely reoccupying the building following evacuation. General contractor site-specific fire response plans will be reviewed in the site-specific orientation. The following are guidelines in the event you discover a fire at work. Do not endanger yourself to fight a fire. Sound the fire alarm and notify others to call 911 and report the fire. If you can safely attempt to extinguish a small fire, you may do so. Only fight small, localized fires with a fire extinguisher. Pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, sweep back and forth as you walk away from the fire. If you cannot extinguish the fire, try to isolate the room by leaving and closing the doors. Evacuate the building following the evacuation routes. Assist visitors and report to the mustering station for attendance, and provide the fire marshal with any pertinent information. Some of the tasks you perform at work, such as lifting, reaching, and repeating the same movements, can strain your body. In some situations, these tasks can result in an injury to the muscles, tendons, ligaments, nerves, blood vessels, joints of the neck, shoulders, arms, wrists, legs, and back. As part of your job, you will need to handle various materials, and taking the extra few seconds to think about proper lifting techniques can prevent injuries. Here are some tips for safe lifting in the workplace. When lifting or manually handling materials, use only methods that ensure your safety, and do not manually lift items over 50 pounds or with uneven weight distribution. Never attempt to lift objects that are too heavy or bulky to handle safely. Never overestimate your ability to perform a task. If possible, don't lift manually. Whenever possible, push rather than pull loads, since pushing uses strong leg muscles, whereas pulling uses the easily strained back muscles. Size up the load and make a preliminary lift. Inspect the object or load for sharp edges, slivers, wet or greasy spots. Wear gloves when handling objects with sharp edges, and inspect the route over which the load is to be carried to ensure it is free of obstructions or spills that could cause tripping or slipping. If manual lifting is necessary, remember these important lifting techniques. Place your feet apart for good balance. bend your knees. Hold the object as close to your body as possible. Lift smoothly and slowly. Pivot with your feet. Do not twist your back. Push rather than pull a load, and share the load. Work with a partner. Divide the load and make several trips instead of one heavy load. Whenever possible, get mechanical assistance for heavy loads. Know your own strengths and limitations. Use proper lifting, bending, and sitting techniques on the job to help avoid back injuries. WHMIS, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. WHMIS is a response to Canadian workers' right to know and was created to help reduce injuries or disease caused by exposure to hazardous materials used in the workplace. You should know what are the hazards of any product, how do you protect yourself from exposure, what to do in case of an emergency, and where you can obtain more information when handling various products. There are 3 elements that make up a WHMIS program: labels on containers of hazardous products used in the workplace to alert workers to the hazards and provide instructions for safe handling, material safety data sheets, technical bulletins that contain detailed hazard precautionary and emergency information about controlled products, and education and training. Workers must receive education about the hazards and safe work handling procedures of chemicals they are using. WHMIS covers 6 classes of controlled products with 2 subclasses. These are compressed gases, flammable and combustible materials, oxidizers, poisons and infectious materials causing immediate and/or serious toxic effect, poisonous and infectious materials causing other toxic effect, and poison and infectious biohazardous or infectious materials. Also, corrosive materials and dangerously reactive materials. Prior to you using any product in the workplace, it's important for you to look at the label and identify any of these hazard symbols. Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDSs, are a vital component to ensuring your safety when using chemicals. The Material Safety Data Sheets will provide you with detailed hazard, precautionary, and emergency information about a particular product. It's important that you review all Material Safety Data Sheets prior to using a product for the first time. The Controlled Products Regulation lists 54 items of information in 9 recommended sections on an MSDS, but it does not require the standard format. MSDSs may be in different formats and sections can be arranged in a different order. We've highlighted several important sections for your information. Starting with product identification and use. This section will provide you with information on the intended use of a product as well as the date when the MSDS was created. It's important to note that all MSDSs are only valid for 3 years. Ensure the MSDS you are looking at is current. The section on safe handling and storage will outline measures to protect yourself when using the chemical. For example, use with adequate ventilation. While the section on exposure, control, and personal protection will tell you what you can do to protect yourself and what personal protective equipment you should use. For example, avoid eye contact, safety glasses or goggles recommended. The section on first aid measures will tell you what to do in various personal emergencies, where the section on emergency procedures will tell you what to do in various emergencies such as fires and spills. In each case, the information on the Material Safety Data Sheet is invaluable. Taking the time to review all the sections on every material safety data sheet prior to use of the product is important. Let's take a minute to review some key concepts of WMIS. All products in the workplace must be properly labeled, and a corresponding material safety data sheet should be readily available. Ensure you get training on the specific safe handling of any chemical in the workplace before using it. Do not transfer hazardous product from a labeled container to a non-labeled container. Ensure you know where the MSDS binder is at your workplace. Talk to your supervisor. In the event of an emergency with a hazardous product, activate the emergency response plan for your site and report or contact first aid without delay. If you have any questions about handling or dealing with hazardous products in your workplace, talk to your supervisor. Personal protective equipment. It is a condition of employment that employees wear all personal protective equipment when required. Workers are responsible for ensuring they have appropriate clothing for their work environment, appropriate CSA-approved footwear, and CSA-approved headgear, such as a hard hat. NEL will provide safety eyewear, fall protection gear, hearing protection, respiratory protection, and gloves. In this module, we will look at site-specific hazards that you may encounter while working at NEL. We'll talk about risk assessment and control, de-energization and lockout, fall protection, ladders, silica, asbestos, confined spaces, and tools. Risk assessment and control is a careful, detailed examination of anything in your work assignment that could cause harm to people, environmental contamination, damage to facilities and/or equipment. The primary objective of risk assessment is to ensure that no one gets injured or becomes ill as a result of the work assignment. The secondary objective is to ensure that the work being done will not negatively impact the environment or NEL business operations. To systematically assess risk within the workplace, you must complete the 5 steps of risk assessment. Number 1, look for the hazards. Number 2, decide who or what might be harmed or negatively impacted. Number 3, evaluate the risks and assess existing precautions already in place. Number 4, record the findings and develop an action plan to mitigate or minimize those risks. And number 5, review the assessment and revise as necessary. All field employees are required to complete a NEL pre-task hazard assessment and control for each work activity. Lockout means the use of a lock or locks to render machinery or equipment inoperable or to isolate an energy source in accordance with a written procedure. When determining if lockout is essential, consider if the unexpected release of an energy source could cause an injury. As electricians, you are probably familiar with protocols for de-energization and lockout. However, there are many other sources of stored energy that could cause serious injuries. For example, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, chemical, or thermal. You must consider other sources of energy that could cause serious injury. There are several steps to consider when performing de-energization and lockout. 1. View the location. 2. Determine the energy sources. 3. Shut off all equipment. 4. Determine what to isolate and deactivate. Consider energy isolating device such as the main power, and look for control system isolating devices such as control power. 5. Determine your isolation points and the isolating devices you're going to use. 6. Apply your personal locks to each energy source. 7. Advise all the other workers in the area. And 8. Verify, test that the lockout is effective. Situations may exist where it is vital to the maintenance process that equipment be energized. Only qualified and authorized workers who follow written safe work procedures may perform the work. Only parts vital to the maintenance process may be energized. If in doubt, lock it out and talk to your supervisor. It's important to remember that a lockout procedure must be written and followed. With group lockout, every worker is required to have an individual lock with a label. Ensure your lock is labeled and that no combination locks are used. Locks can only be removed by the person or persons who installed them. Refer to the NEL OH&S manual for more information on proper lockout procedures. Falls are a real hazard in BC workplaces. 50% of all fatalities from falling in Canada involved workers who were either not wearing or not correctly using fall protection equipment. Consider this. In a third of a second, you can fall 2 feet. In 2 seconds, you can fall 64 feet. This leaves you with no time to react or to catch yourself. WorkSafe BC regulation and NEL policy requires that a fall protection system is used when work is being performed from which a fall of 3 meters or 10 feet or more may occur, or where a fall from a height of less than 3 meters, 10 feet, involves an unusual risk of injury. The first step in preventing fall hazards is identifying the factors and hazards that may contribute to falls, such as unprotected open edges, incorrect use of fall restraint, control devices and fall arrest systems, surfaces that are slippery because they are wet, freshly polished or oily, footwear that is unsuitable, obstructions in the work area such as equipment, tools, and waste materials, incorrect use of ladders, inadequate instructions, openings or holes not identified or unprotected, moving from one surface to another, loss of hand grip, and weather conditions. Conventional fall protection. This option involves preventing workers from reaching the edge of a potential fall situation. Examples of conventional fall protection include guardrails, handrails, barriers, ladders, and caged ladders. Where it is impractical to install guardrails or barriers, fall restraint prevents workers from approaching the fall hazard. These systems intend to limit a worker's movement so a worker is unable to reach a location where there is a risk of falling. Fall restraint systems use a full body harness to attach the worker to an anchor, leaving both hands free to work. The fall arrest system protects workers after they fall by stopping a fall in progress before the worker hits the surface or hazard below. Fall arrest systems are low on the hierarchy of controls for fall protection. This method should only be considered if conventional or fall restraint methods are impractical. 4 components must be present in every fall restraint or fall arrest system. These include a full body harness that is connected to lanyards or lifelines and secured to an approved anchor point. Rescue and self-rescue devices should also be available. You must receive training in fall restraint and fall arrest prior to utilizing these systems on a worksite. Working from ladders is part of every electrician's daily activities. Common causes of ladder accidents include improper setup, overreaching rather than moving the ladder, standing ladders on other items to gain additional height, climbing one-handed while carrying items, standing on the very top instead of getting a taller ladder, leaving tools and equipment on top of the ladder, using worn or damaged ladders, failing to secure the ladder in place, placing the ladder at an improper angle, using metal ladders in locations where contact with electrical wire is possible. When working on ladders, follow these procedures to prevent falls and injuries. Ensure you choose the correct ladder for the job. Extension ladders for access, step ladders for performance work, protected platforms for high work. Only short duration work can be performed from a ladder without utilizing a fall arrest system. 3 points of contact must be maintained at all times. Remember to set up ladders with a 4 vertical to 1 horizontal slope. It's called the 4-to-1 ratio. Extend ladders approximately 1 meter, 3 feet above a safe landing area, and tie, block, or otherwise secure the ladder to prevent it from slipping at the bottom. Do not carry objects while climbing. Do not use ladders for support, scaffold planking, or any horizontal load-bearing support. Keep your body within the sides of the ladder and do not reach further than your arm's length out from the ladder. Let's review some important fall protection points. Never work in an area where there is an unprotected edge and exposure to a fall. Fall protection must be used where a fall from 3 meters or 10 feet or more may occur, or where there is a risk of injury due to hazards below. Properly installed and maintained guardrails are the first and best component in a fall protection system, followed by fall restraint, then fall arrest. Fall protection is required when operating or working in an aerial device or elevated work platform. A violation of NEL fall protection policy and procedures may result in immediate suspension and/or termination. Exposure to silica. Drilling into concrete releases a fine sandy dust which contains silica. Breathing in this dust can cause serious lung disease called silicosis. Electricians who regularly and routinely drill into concrete are at risk of developing this disease. Let's watch a short introduction video about silica.
Silica. It's one of the most common substances on Earth. It can be found in materials like sand and rock, and building products like concrete and brick. When a worker cuts, grinds, or drills materials that contain silica, dangerous crystalline silica dust is released into the air. As the worker breathes, silica crystals flow into his mouth and nose and down the air passages deep into the lungs. The tiny crystals enter the small, fragile air sacs where oxygen is absorbed into the blood. Immune system cells, called macrophages, engulf and try to dissolve the crystals, but they are unable to. Over time, more and more crystals build up inside the macrophage cells. The macrophages carry the silica into the walls of the lung, where they die. Scar tissue forms around the dead cells and spreads as more cells die. This damage can continue even after the exposure to silica stops. Eventually, so much scar tissue forms that the lungs can no longer function. For information on how to protect yourself from silica exposure, visit WorksafeBC.com.
To protect yourself from silica exposure at work, when possible, select drills with dust capture removal attachments and ensure you are properly instructed on how to operate all components of the system. Wear a half-face respirator equipped with HEPA 100 series filters when drilling holes into concrete. When possible, wet the area down to reduce the amount of dust. Use a vacuum approved for concrete dust to clean up any spilled dust on your clothes, equipment, or other surfaces. Do not use compressed air to blow dust off your clothing, equipment, or tools. A confined space is defined as an area other than an underground work area that is enclosed or partially enclosed, is not designed or intended for continuous human occupancy, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit that may complicate the provision of first aid, evacuation, rescue, or other emergency response service, and is large enough and so configured that a worker could enter to perform assigned work. There are numerous confined spaces that may be found on NEL projects. Some examples of these include service culverts, service tunnels, catch basins, foundation areas between walls and banks, crawl spaces, tanks, elevator shafts, attics or other ceiling spaces, silos, and sumps. NEL employees must not enter into any potential confined space for any reason. Foremen are responsible to identify all potential confined spaces during the job planning stages. Prime contractors are responsible for ensuring all potential confined spaces are identified and marked. Your job site-specific orientation should highlight those hazards. When in doubt about an area, do not enter into the confined space. Talk to your supervisor or safety representative. Remember that a confined space is any area that has restricted access or potential for low levels of oxygen. You may be required to use a variety of hand tools that may be self-driven or power-driven, such as cordless drills, circular saw, grinder, reciprocating saw, chipper, and pipe benders. These are not an inclusive list. However, they are some of the common tools that you will see on your job site. Prior to using any power tool that you are not familiar with, you are required to get training from an on-site supervisor or a competent coworker. Be aware that there are hazards and risks associated with using power tools, such as electrical shock, pinching, flying debris, heavy to lift or hard to handle tools, high noise levels, high torque. Many tools may give off harmful dust, fumes, mists, vapors, or gases, and they may cause cuts and or crush injuries. Safe work practice and procedures for using hand tools. Electrical tools must be operated within their design limitations. Inspect the tool and power cord to ensure they are in good repair before use. When not in use, tools should be stored in a dry place. Electrical tools should not be used in damp or wet locations. Always use proper personal protective equipment as dictated by the tool being used and tasks being performed. At a minimum, safety glasses, hearing protection, and gloves should be used when operating electrical tools. Never carry power tools by the cord. Never yank a power cord to disconnect it from the receptacle. Keep cords away from heat, oil, and sharp edges. Disconnect power tools from source when you're not using them for an extended period of time. Secure work with clamps or a vise, freeing your hands. Ensure good footing and maintain your balance. Ensure your hair is tied back and loose clothing and jewelry cannot be caught in moving parts. Avoid accidental starting. Do not hold down the switch while carrying a plugged-in tool. Examine guards to ensure proper function and protection. Refer to the user's manual for instructions in the proper care, cleaning, and lubricating of the equipment.
Hi, I'm Steve Lacon, and I'm an electrician and part of the Nightingale team for 25 years. I know firsthand the pressures and challenges you face every day to get your job done well. As you heard in this video, there's associated hazards in performing your work. We need your help in assuring those hazards will not affect your quality of life and that of your coworkers. Take the time to think about your task, the associated hazards, and how you can eliminate or protect yourself from those hazards. Talk to your supervisor about your work. Don't perform any work that you feel is unsafe. If you have any suggestions or ideas how we can make your job safer, or want more information on our health and safety program, don't hesitate to contact me or talk to your Health and Safety Committee representative. Thank you for making safety a priority.
This completes the first part of your orientation. The second part of your orientation will be conducted by your supervisor on site. Also, remember that all NEL employees are required to complete the general contractor's orientation before starting work on any GC site. Please complete the knowledge review now and then notify your presenter once you've finished. If you have any questions about this orientation, speak to your presenter before leaving today. Thank you.